Hello, my name is Mary Mahoney, and this is my culture chest. I chose to build my own box for this project because it reflects one of my exterior social identities. I am a female. I'm a cisgender female born in the 1970s in a middle-class Jersey suburb of New York City, where women had very traditional expectations and roles. My mother initially stayed home with us five kids while my father worked. I've always been aware of being female. As the oldest girl, there were things my brothers could do that were forbidden to me, and also Title IX was new when I was a young sports kid, and the separate but not equal nature of the funding made me angry. I've assumed a great deal of female roles that were expected of me as a child of the 70s. However, one way I have bucked the usual stereotypes of women is my love for building and woodwork. My husband and I purchased a 200-year-old home 28 years ago that needed a lot of repairs, and I assumed, based entirely on sexism, that my husband would be doing these repairs. That was not the case. He didn't have the skills or the patience to learn, and I did. Plus, I fell in love with the process. Initially, this was something I didn't broadcast. I would say, we fixed something, or we built something, as if I was a helper to my husband and not the other way around. I did this to avoid the looks of incredulity from the local men and judgment from my family. Women friends as well made me feel less feminine for the work I did. To this day, when I pick up lumber from the local hardware store, I'm used to the inquisitive looks from the men who shop there. But I'm happy to report it's been a while since a store clerk has said something overtly sexist to me, so it seems that the gender stereotyping I've gotten used to has changed in my community. Over time, I grew more confident in my skills and much less concerned about what others thought. I tell anyone who asks, yeah, I built that. So this joinery box here represents for me my female social identity. I should also note that part of the reason I did our home repairs was that we couldn't afford professionals. So this outward identity is influenced by our social class, which was lower middle class for most of my early years. I grew up poorer than our neighbors due to our large family size. I remember having less technology than other families in our neighborhood and getting donations from the Catholic Church, where my dad was a deacon. I wasn't ostracized, but I felt the difference, especially when I couldn't afford to do the same activities as my friends. When my husband and I started our family, we were also lower middle class. I too stayed at home, and we struggled, similar struggle to those of my childhood. I felt the same shame that I did as a child when we could not afford to provide more for our children. They too missed out on activities and technologies. I think it helped that where we lived, other families also struggled. For my part, I got thrifty and I got into gardening to help feed my family. There were a few summers that we ate most of our meals out of our garden. To acknowledge this class social identity, I've included this sprig of rosemary from my herb garden on top of my culture box. I spoke earlier how my interest in woodworking is not common for my gender, but I have other more traditional traits for women of my cohort. I am a mother of 3 children and been married to my husband for 30 years. Being a mom is a strong identity for me. I have the caregiver role in our home, and there are times when it fits me well, though the inequity of the cooking and cleaning has always bothered me. When I was a stay-at-home mom, there were some local supports for me. I'd never been one for joining groups, but I did attend free programs at the county libraries with my children, and I made friends with other women who stayed home. This helped the process of stepping away from full-time employment make it feel less lonely or scary. For my parental status, I've included on the outside of my box this framed photo of me and my children when they were young and underfoot and in matching Christmas PJs that I sewed for them. I've always been aware of being female, but I did not grow up being aware of being white. Growing up, my family was the mythical norm: white, Christian, not too poor, and young. Also, it should be noted that I'm from Generation X, which means my parents were baby boomers. The population explosion of the baby boom generation led to a smaller boom for my generation. It felt like our whole neighborhood was full of kids around the same age. I knew people from a variety of religions, cultural backgrounds, and regions of the world, but it was a white homogenous community with only a handful of Black families. What I knew of Black culture, I learned from TV. My grandfather served in World War II and in 1950 used his GI Bill, which was not awarded to Black men with similar service, to purchase a home in northern New Jersey in a brand new Red Line community. He moved out of New York City and as a direct response to the Great Migration, which increased after the war. This is a tale told in our family for 2 generations without shame. Since we seemed to struggle financially, when I was growing up, I never considered myself to have been privileged. It wasn't until I married and moved away from home that my experience helped me to see things differently, and I've fully come to recognize my white privilege. For my race status, I have included this red line of fabric around my box to represent that red line community where my family's wealth building began. I had a similar experience with another social identity of mine. I am heterosexual. In the 70s and 80s, this was not just the mythical norm, but rather the only socially acceptable open relationship between couples. My high school with 300 students had no self-identifying gay people. As Catholics, it would not have been acceptable in my home for any of us to identify as LGBTQ+. The first time I met an openly gay person was when I was 20. He was a friend of my roommate's and commented on a photo I had displayed of my then fiancé, now husband, and I kissing. He asked who took the photo and where I got it developed. It was taken by my cousin and developed at the local store. I didn't get the questioning until he commented that it must have been nice to have the acknowledgement of love by my family and not to worry who sees me showing that affection. It stunned me and permanently changed the way I thought. I have since recognized my status as a privileged status as a heterosexual woman. For my heterosexual identity, I've included that photo of my husband and I from 1991. On the inside of my box, I have my interior social identities. First one's kind of funny. I was brought up believing that I was mostly Irish. I have an Irish name. Every member of my family wears a clodagh ring, which was designed by the Joyce clan centuries ago. I took Irish step dancing classes from the age of 3 to 10. There's a lot of acceptability for Irish culture in America, despite the early discriminatory practices. It wasn't until a genealogy class in my senior year at college that I learned I was misinformed. Although my father's father was 100% Irish, no other grandparent had Irish blood. With a Norwegian grandfather on my mother's side and some Danish and Swedish grandmothers, I was mostly Scandinavian. When I asked my mother how she could let me believe I was mostly Irish, she said, "That side was so loud, how would you have heard me? Being Irish is still part of my identity, even though I have less Irish blood than I thought." I've included for my ethnic identity this photo of me taken at the age of 3 in my Irish step dancing costume. My next interior social identity would be my spirituality. I was raised a strict Roman Catholic. The church was a big part of my youth. I continued practicing the faith, raising my own children Catholic, and even teaching religious education for 8 years. Then Trump became president. His far right-wing political ideologies that othered already marginalized people became too much. I could not stomach the embrace of this person who stood against everything I was taught to care about. I felt alienated at Mass, with the priest ignoring the most recent racist tweet of the president and focusing instead on abortion and the perceived attacks against the church by radical leftists. My own father told me, "You can't be a Democrat and a Catholic." And it was then that I walked away. I lost some friends, but what I have taken with me is my strong moral code, an embrace of personal spirituality, and a desire to impart good into this world. My father hand makes rosaries, and I've included one to represent my religious status along with my grandfather's wartime Bible. Another status that is exterior but also interior is my age. I've become more aware of my middle age as far as it factors into my future employment. When I stepped away from full-time employment to raise children, I didn't anticipate my inability to return to the profession for 20 years. The biggest reason was the downturn in the economy in 2008, but other factor was my age. I was told to my face during an interview for an entry-level, low-paid case management position that had they known how long I was out of the field, they never would have interviewed me. I did get the job and brought with me value I did not know I had. All of my colleagues were 20 years younger, and although they were skilled and knowledgeable about the field, I had my own personal experiences that were applicable to the work we were doing and allowed me to be a valued member of the team. I wasn't invited to after-work events with my colleagues, but I didn't feel excluded. My life was in a different direction. I have included my business card to my interior box, which reflects to me a time I overcame my age social identity. Another social identity that should be more external than internal is my ability. However, I consider it internal because of the drive that's behind it. When my mother was 57 years old, she was struck with a disease that permanently damaged her spine, leaving her body too compromised for her to return to the classroom, forcing an early retirement. This spring, I was working for a nonprofit, earning my highest pay in a job I really enjoyed. But I kept thinking of my mother, who had to stop working at 57. Despite being relatively healthy, I wanted to find a job that I could continue to enjoy regardless of my physical condition, and it was then that I decided at the age of 52 to quit work and return to school for my MSW so I could be a clinical therapist. I am including my acceptance letter to LSU for my ability social identity. And finally, my interior social identity that impacts me the most is my nationality, which I tied to my husband's identity as a service-connected disabled Marine. I met my husband the day after he joined the Marine Corps. He was injured while in service, and the resulting disabilities impact my life every day. Recently, I have identified as a caregiver for a disabled veteran, which has opened opportunities for my own self-care, something I had not received in the past. My identity to caregiver is strong. which is why, combined with the pride I feel for my husband's service, I consider my U.S. nationality my strongest interior social identity. This is complicated by systemic racism, which started at our founding and is woven into the very fabric of our country. We have a lot of work to do as a nation, but I hope, and it's my hope for our nation that gives me the pride I feel, that together we can work to be what we were always meant to be, united. In my box, I am including some of the letters my husband and I sent each other when he was away at war. Thank you so much.